It is distressing to see that Jack Charlton, Nobby Stiles, both died with dementia. Bobby Charlton, Sir Bobby Charlton, has dementia. And it would seem that footballer after footballer from that era, albeit of the 50s, 60s, 70s, are dying of or with dementia. And it's been put down very much to heading the ball. Now, those who played football back in those times will tell you the ball was different, the ball was heavier, the ball carried water. Also, the game was different. If you look at a 1960s football match, the ball was hoofed aggressively from end to end. The ball spent a lot more time in the air than the modern, what I would call sort of Man City way of playing it along the ground, often a bit like rugby, passing back along a line before going forward. But there is deep concern over this. There is deep concern in rugby too about concussions leading to dementia and other problems, and indeed one or two lawsuits perhaps on their way in rugby. So is this new move, this new idea that we should stop 12-year-olds and under from heading the ball, is this the right and responsible thing to do, or are we just taking it too far? Are we in danger of changing the game of football completely? Are we nannying far too much? Do we have to accept that with all sport there is a degree of risk? Well, joining me is Professor Angus Hunter, Head of Sports Science and Professor of Neuromuscular Physiology. Angus, welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Nigel. Good evening.
Good evening. Now, this is a real debate, isn't it? Because so many of these icons, these stars, and it's happened to footballers, of course, from many, many lower divisions and far less fashionable players, but so many of that iconic 66 World Cup squad getting dementia. Clearly the link between that and the heavy football, I mean, clearly it's there. So is it right to introduce no headers for 12s and under?
Well, clearly we do have a duty as a society to safeguard our children. However, I do accept that we've also got a problem with obesity in children. We need to get our children out and about. We need to get them exercising. So clearly we don't want to put our children off from playing football. But it's about using the evidence we have at the moment. And certainly there was a study published a few years ago by University of Glasgow that showed that ex-professional footballers were 3.5 times more likely to die of dementia. Now, we had also in our own laboratories, we did a protocol actually heading the ball, and we showed changes in the electrical pathways from the brain to the muscle. And we also showed impaired memory recall straight after. So clearly there is an effect when you do head the ball. Now, already there's been safeguards put in the amateur game to limit headers to 10. So either within the session or throughout the week. Now, what we do know in children under the age of 12 is they have a developing brain. If you take actual concussion, children take a lot longer to recover from a concussion than, say, an adult does. And while the research isn't quite there in terms of heading a football in children, I do think it's a pragmatic approach to protect them by removing this. But also, if you look at Scotland introduced this ban about 2 years ago, and admittedly we've had the pandemic, which means that we've not had that much football being played. But certainly all the coaches I've spoken to really sort of say that at that age, they don't do much heading anyway. However, I do think it protects children if you do get a coach who wants to do a series of drills over a series of sessions to get a particular core skill better, but we know that they can't do that.
Angus, what you say about 12-year-olds and under, and albeit, you know, they may not head the ball many times, what you say about those young developing brains taking longer to recover, that all sounds very logical to me. But really what I'm getting at here is you can make the argument that being punched in boxing is going to do some damage, that playing tight head prop in rugby, clearly in a big scrum, can't do you a power of good. Being hit by a cricket ball, even with a helmet on, is going to cause you some damage. Is this the first step to effectively trying to change all the contact sports that people participate in on the grounds they're not very good for us?
I don't think so, Nigel. No one's suggesting that we actually change the game itself. And you can also argue some of the most exciting parts of the game is the action of heading a ball into a goal mouth. That's not necessarily, I don't think that's on the table. What's in our power is to use the science and use the technology to better protect our players, particularly in training. And I would argue a lot of the problems we're seeing today isn't necessarily so much of what happened on the field of play, it's more to do with what happened in training. We did a documentary a few years ago with Alan Shearer, and in that he actually said it would be commonplace for him to do 100 headers in one session. So we need to move beyond that. What I would like to see is already there's a large-scale projects, big investment going on to this area, and working with companies, looking at technology that we can start to develop to know what is a safe amount of headers that a player can actually receive. So then we can get to the stage where we can fine-tune it more. At the moment, we're dealing with very blunt instruments. So I'm not advocating that we necessarily change the game itself. It's how can we make it safer for them.
I have to say, Professor Hunter, I am normally one that says no to all things nanny state, but I think in terms of the way football players train and under-12s, for once, I have to say, I'm with you on this. I think you're right. I think it's just plain common sense, and I thank you for joining us on this show.